Hey. We're ready to rock and roll. Eileen,
All right,
take it away.
if we can get started here. Welcome, everybody, to our Prescription Drug Affordability Board meeting. And I guess we should start with roll call, right? Yeah. Well, let me see. Let me get it. We don't really have any introductions, do we?
I don't think there's anyone new.
No.
So
Okay, so roll call. You want to move?
sure.
Okay, agency start, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. So Mike Newton, I'm here.
I'm Ryan Bistresi. I'm the Assistant Chief Pharmacy Officer here at Healthcare Authority.
And online? Doug, I see you.
Hi, Doug Barthel, board member.
Okay, and Huang
Hong Trong, board member.
and Gregory.
Greg Gibson, board member.
And who else do we have there?
And I'm pretty sure we got Kelly online.
Okay.
And then Marina, are you there?
Yes. Hello. Good morning. This is Marina. I'm a HCA staff, health economic analyst.
Okay. Well, then that take care of it.
Yeah.
Well, we got everybody here this morning. That's good. Hopefully someday Marianne will be back. I know she hopes so too. So then we can move on to the director's report, Mike.
Okay, great. So yeah, we are back after a little bit of a break, but great to be with everyone again. As you just mentioned, our fifth board seat is still vacant as of right now, but I'm hearing they're in the works to get new HCA directors. So yeah, we can get our old board member back. We'll have to wait for budgets and appointments and a few other things to stabilize. So we'll see what happens here in the next month or two. Some interesting updates. I know I've talked with most of the staff and the board members a little bit about this, but as most of us know, there was a lawsuit over in Colorado around some of their drug reviews that were done, and so just kind of an update. About a month ago, maybe a little more, the district court dismissed the lawsuit because it said that Amgen did not have standing to sue. So then it concluded that Amgen lacked the standing because it was not directly regulated by the PDAB law that it was challenging, and it could not show that it faced concrete and imminent future injury from the law as an unregulated party. And then the court upheld that the UPL would not directly regulate the wholesale prices that manufacturers charge, since it is intended to apply to downstream transactions in the pharmaceutical chain. Further, the court held that future hypothetical injury to Amgen was too speculative to be a basis for Amgen standing to sue at this point, since the PDAB has not established a UPL yet, and thus it was not quite clear whether the UPL will be lower than Amgen's current wholesale price. So, long story short, that doesn't solve all of the questions that surround UPLs, but it does clear the way for Colorado to continue with their drug reviews. So other interesting things that are happening over in Colorado, I believe it's this week, they're having a rulemaking hearing and creating some rules about upper payment limits for Enbrel. And so they're going to be doing some introductions of the rules as well as a data presentation from the staff. So that's moving forward. And then down in Oregon, they're having a public comment period here. I believe they also have a PDAB meeting this week for the list of prescription drugs and insulin products that were selected for their affordability review. So just some of the other interesting things that are happening around in other states. So
Everybody's moving along.
Yep.
Okay then. Well, then I guess we move on to reviewing the drug selection policy. That's you too.
Yep. Yeah, so with the drug selection policy, we posted that to our website. We sent that out to the board members. Not a whole lot of new and different stuff. Just basically updating our policy since in the dashboard, the board members wanted us to sort our list by ingredient. So just some updates to the policy to reflect how the changes were made in the dashboard. And then Kelly will be going over the dashboard here in just a little bit to show us what's been done, talk a little bit about the process, and then see if any board members have questions. But so yeah, the policy has been sent out, and then just I think have a vote to see if everyone's okay with updating it as it stands, and then we can.
Do any of the board members have any comments about the changes in the selection? Can't even talk this morning. Selection policy? Don't see anybody. Can I get a motion to approve the changes then?
Move to approve.
Okay, in a second.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, then the changes have been adopted.
Fantastic.
Okay, so now we can go to Kelly for the updates.
Okay, Kelly, take it away. Kelly on the. I do see Kelly. Yeah, okay. Just want to make sure she was a panelist so she could present.
There we go.
Right now.
Maybe she's.
Kelly, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
All right. Can you
There
hear
we-
me now?
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
All right. So, since the last board meeting, which was, I think, 6 months ago, we made some changes to our shortlist. So in this presentation, I'm going to go over how we went from shortlist at the NDC level to aggregating the NDCs by labeler code and generic name to create our new aggregated shortlists. So since it's been 6 months, I'll refresh everyone's memory of the PDAB bill language about affordability review. I'll go over some data revisions we did alongside our revision of the shortlist. And then I'll go over again the data measures that are going to be used for selecting prescription drugs for affordability review. I'll go over how we aggregated the NDCs that are eligible for affordability review at the labeler code and generic name level. And then we'll have time for discussion and Q&A, but if you have any questions throughout the presentation or if there's anything you want me to go over again, feel free to stop me. You don't have to hold your questions until the end. And as a reminder of where we are in the affordability review process, we're at the selecting drugs stage. All right, so a refresher on the bill language concerning conducting affordability reviews. So the board shall consider the class of prescription drugs and availability of therapeutic equivalents, input from relevant advisory groups, and the average patient's out-of-pocket cost for the drug. And then the board can choose up to 24 drugs a year to review. So when we were aggregating the NDCs, we did drop a couple of NDCs from our list of eligible prescription drugs, and I'll explain why. So when we looked at the manufacturers for all of the prescription drugs eligible for affordability review, we noticed that 4 NDCs, which I will be showing in the next slide, were distributed by repackagers. And according to the bill language, if they're distributed by a repackager, they're not considered a manufacturer. And so they're excluded from affordability review. And so if you don't know what a repackager is, they're like companies that buy prescription drugs from the manufacturer in bulk and repackage it into smaller containers for sale. And then so after dropping the 4 NDCs, we now have 290 eligible drugs for affordability review instead of 294. And these are the 4 NDCs that we dropped from the list because they're from repackagers. And we also reviewed the manufacturers of the remaining 209 drugs just to make sure there's no more drugs that need to be dropped. Okay, so before I get into how we aggregated the drugs for our new shortlists, I want to do a quick refresher on the data measures that we used since it's been a while. So in choosing prescription drugs for affordability review, the board will look at the 3 required measures from the bill that I showed earlier, which is color-coded in blue here. And then the board came up with the dark green measures that they wanted to look at. And then you'll also notice that there's a little graph icon for the measures. So those are the quantitative data measures, or the measures that can be measured, counted, or expressed as a number. And these are the measures that are going to be used in our ranking and weighting methodology, which I'll also go over again. All right, so I'm going to go over the steps that we use to aggregate our drugs. So there's actually only one new step in our methodology to create the shortlist, which is after we separated the drugs into specialty and non-specialty, we then aggregated the drugs by labeler code and generic name. And after that, the rest of the steps are the same. They're just conducted at the labeler code and generic name level instead of at the NDC level. But I'll still briefly go over each step. So the first step we did was we separated the eligible NDCs into specialty and non-specialty drugs. So as a reminder, our pharmacy team defines specialty drugs as medications that require special storage, handling, administration, or monitoring, with the exception of drugs that were reclassified as biologics under the Biologics Price Competition and Innovation Act. So for us, this means that drugs that are biologics and biosimilars were considered specialty, and brand and generics were considered non-specialty. And then, so after we did that, we moved on to the new step in our methodology, which is aggregating the NDCs by labeler code and generic name. So I want to bring back a modified version of the slide that I showed in, I think, maybe one of our first board meetings. So if we go back to the definition of what an NDC is, I mentioned that an NDC is made up of 3 segments of code, which identifies the labeler, the product code, and the package size of the NDC. So when I say we are aggregating by labeler code, that means we're aggregating NDCs that share the same first 5 digits of the NDC, which means they share the same labeler. And what is a labeler? Well, a labeler code uniquely identifies the company, which is the labeler, that manufactures and or distributes the drugs. So then using this makes sure we are aggregating the drugs from the same manufacturer or distributor. And then a generic name is the list of drug ingredient names. So this makes sure we're aggregating the same drug ingredients together. And so our goal is to aggregate drugs from the same ingredients from the same manufacturer or distributor. So when we did this aggregation, we also had to aggregate the selection criteria since they were calculated at the NDC level. So the selection criteria, once again, are those 4 quantitative data measures that the board used to prioritize the drugs eligible for affordability review. So for some selection criteria, like sums, like total paid amount, that just meant like summing them up for each NDC. But then for some others, we had to recalculate the selection criteria, and I'll have an example of that in the next slide. All right, so here's an example of how we aggregated these NDCs, which are Orencia by labeler code and generic name. So I don't have the manufacturer shown here, but you can see that they both have the same first 5 digits of their NDC. So that indicates they're from the same manufacturer or distributor. And the last 4 columns in this example are the 4 quantitative selection criteria. So I'm first going to point out the straightforward data measures that were combined. So total out-of-pocket cost, which is OOP, abbreviated in the table, which is the 3rd column from the right, is simply summed, and so is the total paid amount, which is the 1st column from the right. So those were the straightforward ones. But then for a number of people using the drug, which is now called number of people using the labeler code and generic name, we had to repull that because we wanted a distinct count So really it's number of distinct people using the labeler code and generic name. So in other words, if a person uses like multiple NDCs that are in the same labeler code and generic name, we only want to count them once. So for example, in this example, if somebody used both the syringe and the ClickJet, we only want to count them as using this labeler code and generic name once. So if we didn't repull this at the labeler code and generic name measure, we would have been counting like people twice or maybe 3 times, and it would just artificially inflate the number of people using the labeler code and generic name. So we did have to repull that. So that's why if you're in a lot of cases, if you're like comparing our unaggregated and aggregated list, if you just eyeball it, you'll think that the numbers are off, but really we're recalculating some of the measures. And another example of a measure that we're recalculating is the average out-of-pocket cost. And this is because this calculation is an average, so you can't just like sum the averages of all the NDCs when you aggregate them. So we actually had to recalculate the average at the labeler code and generic name level. So in this case, the average out-of-pocket cost is the total out-of-pocket cost divided by the number of people using the labeler code and generic name. So we took the sum of the 2 out-of-pocket costs for the 2 Orencias, and then we divided it using the number of distinct people using the labeler code and generic name, which is 1,585. And then so you'll notice the new number for average out-of-pocket cost is $1,017.18. That's different than if you just sum the average out-of-pocket costs for the 2 NDC level Orencias. And so after doing the aggregation, our next step is to rank and weight the data to calculate a weighted rank for each labeler code and generic name. So nothing major has changed methodology-wise, so we're still sorting each quantitative data measure in descending order, only now they've been aggregated at the labeler code and generic name level, whereas before they were being sorted at the NDC level. So if this slide looks familiar, it's because I just changed the column on the very left to say labeler code and generic name instead of NDC because it's the exact same concept. So each quantitative data measure is sorted in descending order and assigned a rank. And then you'll see that the labeler code and generic name may not have the highest rankings across the board for the 4 data measures. So it'll most likely have a mixture of rankings across the data measures. And then for tied rankings, we're still using the average ranking method to break the ties. So for example, and again, I only changed NDC to labeler code and generic name here. Labeler code and generic name 0003C and 0004D both had a total paid amount of $12. And they are technically ranked in positions 3 and 4 here, which is not correct because they both have the same total paid amount. So using the average ranking method, their final total paid amount rank is the average of their rankings. So that would be the sum of their rankings 3 and 4, which is 7, divided by the number of tied labeler code and generic names, which in our case is 2. So 7 divided by 2 is 3.5. And then so their new rankings are both going to be 3.5. And even though we're using the same exact methodology we're using for creating the shortlist at the NEC level that we did previously, I'm still going to go over the methodology again for calculating the weighted rank. And if you wanted like even more like detailed refresher on the methodology, you can go back to the slides that are presented last November. So I'm just going to go over this really briefly. So as you remember, we had the board members assign points to help us rank and weight the quantitative data measures. So these are the weights that were created from that exercise. And this is a visualization of the formula used to calculate the weighted rank for each labeler code and generic name. And then once again, the top 25 lowest weighted ranks for specialty and non-specialty labeler code and generic names would make up the 2 shortlists. And so the weighted rank is the sum of the rank of the data measures multiplied by their respective weights, which is those points that the board assigned to each data measure. And this is the same formula used at the NDC level. So again, nothing has changed except we're now applying our methodology to the aggregated data. And so here's the formula with those points or weights plugged in. All right, and then yeah, let's go over an example of applying the formula to aggregated data. So this is labeler code 00078, and the generic name of this group of drugs is, excuse my pronunciation, fingolimod hydrochloride. And the brand name is Gilenya or Gilenya, not sure. And these drugs are used to treat multiple sclerosis. So you can see that this labeler code and generic name has varied rankings across the 4 data measures, so it doesn't rank highly across all 4 data measures. So using our formula to calculate weighted rank, the weighted rank is the sum of the average out-of-pocket cost rank, which is 14, multiplied by the weight of the average out-of-pocket cost, which is 0.19, plus the total out-of-pocket cost rank, which is 7, multiplied by the weight of the total out-of-pocket cost, which is 0.35, and so on. And then when you plug all those numbers in, you'll get that the weighted rank for Gilenya is 7.17. And so once we calculated the weighted rank for every labeler code and generic name, we selected the top 25 specialty and non-specialty labeler code and generic names with the lowest weighted ranks, and those turned into our 2 shortlists. So here are the 2 shortlists that we ended up with. And after aggregation, we actually only had 17 total specialty labeler code and generic names, so all of them made the list. And this list is copied from our PDAB dashboard, which is available online, which I will do a demo of after this presentation. So you can look at the lists on the dashboard as well, and you don't have to go to this presentation to look at them. All right, so now that we have some new shortlists, the board will look at the weighted rank and all of the data measures, both quantitative and non-quantitative, to select drugs for affordability review. And I showed this list last time of drugs that other state PDABs have selected for affordability review. And even though we do have some new drugs on our list after doing the aggregation, we still only have 1 drug, which is Enbrel, that is in common with another state that's doing affordability reviews, and that's with Colorado. And this is just a continuation of the list because Oregon also had some insulins. All right, so the next steps will be for the board members to review the new shortlists and make selections for affordability review. And that was my last slide, so yeah, I'll open it up for general discussion or questions.
Doug, go ahead. I'll say mine.
Thanks, Kelly. Great job, great presentation. That's a really good synopsis of the process, and I appreciate that. So I wanted to go back to the on the aggregated prioritized list. So there's 17 specialty drugs on that. Did you say that's because all 17 of the specialty drugs that were eligible, is that because that exhausts all the specialty drugs that were eligible?
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head like how many specialty NDCs we had, but after we aggregated by labeler code and generic names, we ended up with these 17 groups, so all of them made the list.
I see. Okay, and then yeah, so I guess it would be helpful. I mean, well, it's not really critical, but I'm just kind of curious what the how many non-specialty there were, if that's the top 25, how many did we get? When we went from the 290 and then we aggregated, how many generic name, I forget, you had a good term for it, but how many aggregated units are there?
Yeah, I think that number is somewhere in the policy or it's on the dashboard. I'll have to take a look. But yeah, I should have had it prepared, but I forgot.
Okay, no problem. Do you know where on the dashboard it would be? Let's see.
Oh, I'm gonna walk through the dashboard right after this,
Oh, okay.
so I'll take a look because I know we had some like text limit issues, so I don't know where I stuffed it in the
Okay,
dashboard.
So Kelly, I don't know whether it's you or Mike that would know this the best. I'm just curious what the differences between Washington and the other states and why we only ended up with 1 of the same. I mean, I'm sure some of it's got to be statute, but I'm just I just was curious as to how much different we ended up being.
So I can help take a stab at that. So as you were correct, it is statute. And so the different cost thresholds in the different states really changes how the states are looking at these drugs. One other thing that Washington has that, say, Colorado does not have is that we have to exclude drugs if they are only approved for an orphan indication. And so some of the, I believe, cystic fibrosis or one of the other medications that Colorado selected was not eligible in Washington. Oregon's selection is very different. I think it is tied to their drug price transparency program, and they also are required to have an insulin. So I think because the different state legislatures passed slightly different criteria is why our list is different than the other lists.
I think we were after Colorado, I know. And I think after Oregon too, right?
Yep, I think we were number
Yeah.
4. So Maryland, Colorado, and Oregon are all
Tried to learn
higher.
from other people.
and then all of the other PDABs since are following in our footsteps.
Yeah, okay, just was curious. Thought that was it, but wanted to, it just seems really odd when you look at it.
Yeah, and I know some other states don't, like we have a restriction that our drugs must be on the market for 7 years or more. And I know like some other states don't have it, which is, I think like one other state is reviewing like Ozempic or something like that. So we wouldn't be able to review that yet for a couple of years. And then I know some of them also have some lower thresholds, like ours is like 60,000 or more for a course of treatment. And I saw some of them have like 30,000. So that might also be why we're selecting different drugs.
As if we need more. Any other questions for Kelly on this? Okay, then.
I have a
guess-
question.
Yeah,
Okay,
go ahead, Hung.
Sorry. Hey, Kelly, just on the slide that you have on right now, I think we need to clarify between non-specialty and specialty, because on a non-specialty list, when you look at the top 15 drugs, the majority of those are considered specialty medication. And so we need to make sure we clarify that with just how we define it further. Because the Xtandi, Carbamatics, are oncology drugs, right? And then Epclusa is hepatitis, and then Gilenya is what we went through as an MS. So those are really all specialty. So people don't get confused.
And Hung, if I may say, so the reason why we have the two lists the way they are is the way that they were approved through the FDA. So the column on the left, the non-specialty, were the NDAs, whereas the ones on the right are BLAs. So another way that we could think about it are, traditional versus biologic. So that's, I agree with you. I think we could look at how we could rename these lists, but that was the basis for why we have these two separate lists.
Okay. Which makes sense, Ryan, because the definition of specialty is very vague and broad. And, it can be anything from, the way you store it to even how much it costs. And it's defined by a majority by the insurance company. So I think just making clear what you just said, Ryan, between the two, that'll be great.
Yep, we can make that update.
Thank you.
Doug?
Sorry, I got distracted. And I forgot what I was going to say, but it'll come back to me. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, well, then we, let's see. Kelly, do you want to go over the dashboard now, or is that?
Oh, now I remember. Sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so when I look at when we were discussing the differences in the results between us and the other states, you were saying how the statutes for the other states are basically more inclusive, would allow more drugs to get onto the eligible list. I'm just curious why, if anyone has an idea why the other states didn't get Humira on their lists, just because that was a real standout for when I look at the data on our dashboard. It was it was a standout high spending drug, and so that would think if they're more inclusive that they should have had that. And so I'm just wondering if anyone knows why they didn't choose that.
mean, I can't speak specifically to, their exact reasoning why. I know, they did their own selection criteria, dashboard, matrices, and their board members, did kind of a similar thing where they were voting on the things that they wanted to prioritize, for example, over in Colorado, of things that they thought were important. So I'm not, I'd have to go and speak to their director, directly. But I do know that, they did have, other ways that they were wanting to sort and look at data, and their board members had their own priorities. So, they weren't set up exactly how we were in terms of, data that they wanted to see, the ways they weighted and ranked things. So, yeah, I can't say exactly why, but they did have a different selection criteria. So.
Okay, thanks.
And of course, from my perspective, I'd be curious to know whether they might be different prescribing practices too with the physicians. Like, it may not be as popular with, it seems odd, but I'm just saying it's possible, or the incidence of the disease, that type of thing. Is that Ronnie?
Just one piece that I've noticed in looking at what's happening in Colorado and Maryland and other states is that part of the decision making was not to choose a drug that the Medicare had already done an evaluation of in order not to duplicate the work from them. But that was an internal decision, and there were other factors involved. But I believe, from what I've read, when the other boards were looking at issues, that was a reason for not choosing Humira. Does that make sense, Doug?
Yep.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So Kelly, do you want to go over the dashboard then? Yeah. Is that
Yeah, sounds good.
okay?
All right, so our dashboard is on our website. If you're not sure where it is, if you go to our PDAB page and you go to resources, you can click the PDAB data dashboard and it'll take you to the dashboard. And so our dashboard is basically the same, but then we just added like 3 additional tabs to show our aggregated data. So I'll just go over the whole dashboard again in case you haven't looked at it in a while. So first we have this overview page, which describes some background about our dashboard, and it's also updated with 290 drugs now instead of 294. And then it gives an overview of the data sources that we used for our dashboard. Then in this dashboard information tab, we have a list of all the dashboards in our dashboard and what they contain. In this data dictionary tab, we have a data dictionary for all the data fields used in our dashboard. And while we were talking just now, I just went through it really quick and found that I stuffed the number of specialty and non-specialty NDCs into the definition of specialty here. So if you go to the definition of specialty, it's here that we had 58 NDCs classified as specialty and 232 classified as non-specialty. So once we consolidated those 58 specialty drugs by labeler code and generic name, there were only 17 labeler code and generic names. And then this is a summary of the eligible drugs that we have. So a table of those 290 NDCs and which threshold they met in the legislation. And then we have a graph that shows the breakdown of the cost of a course of treatment by drug type. And then down here are some interactive tables where you can sort by number of people using the drugs. So this is at the NDC level. And you can also sort the top drugs by total paid amount. Next is our drug product lookup tool. So you can look up information for specific drugs at the NDC level. And I forgot to mention that there's this little dictionary icon on every dashboard. So if you forgot, or you want to look up a certain definition, you can just click on that icon and it'll take you to the data dictionary tab. And then If you don't want to scroll through all the fields, you could just use this filter and search for the specific field that you want to look up. Next is the drug products on multiple list tab. So this just lists the NDCs that met multiple thresholds of the legislation and like which ones they met. And I think all of these met like the 15% and 50%. And next was our NDC level list. So this was on here before. So this was just our short list, but at the NDC level. And then these are the visualizations connected to the short list. And so if you filter something here, like this drug, then it's also connected to the visualizations. So yeah, they're connected and you can compare like multiple drugs at a time. And then we're moving on to the new stuff added to our dashboard. So these are the short lists at the labeler code and generic name level. So it's in the same format as the NDC level list. So same concept of the linked filters. And you can filter by labeler code and generic name. You can filter by brand name. You can filter by therapeutic class, and then you can filter by specialty. And then these are the same visualizations, except we took out the increase and course of treatment visualizations because we didn't calculate them at the labeler code and generic name level. And then finally, we added this tab that's a crosswalk. So you can see like which NDCs are within each labeler code and generic name. And so I wasn't able to like link this to the filters in the aggregated list, but I think there's not a lot. So, and they're also like in order, or you can use a filter so you can find like what you want to see. And yeah, that's it for the dashboard. So yeah, I don't know if we want to move, if you want to see anything again, or yeah, I'll just keep this up and then we can scroll through it if we want for the next part of our discussion.
So Kelly, I just have to ask, did you have to design the website too? Or I'm very impressed, let's just put it that way.
Oh no, I can't take credit for this. All credit goes to like Arshina. She did like this design and then I just updated it. But yeah, I think our design is kind of modeled after Colorado's because I think the board mentioned that was what they were looking for. So yeah.
I'm gonna say this is pretty slick.
Yeah.
It makes it really easy to see a whole lot of different stuff.
So anybody have any questions on this dashboard?
Hey Kelly, it's weighted, right? Is that weighted then the way that you had described on the last presentation, you had used that formulation?
Right. So these are the top 25 lowest weighted rank. So there's the weighted rank in the table
Okay,
here actually.
okay,
So
okay.
yeah.
Okay. Right, well then I guess we can move on.
Sorry.
Okay, sorry, Doug.
Yeah, that's okay. So I feel like we talked about this before, but I can't remember what the answer was. So we have there's the way that you can filter by specialty on these lists. It has to be Y or N. And I just, is there any way to not have any filter by specialty so you can basically see both together? And actually, I'm less interested for this list, more on the prioritize list visualization, the next tab to the right on the dashboard. I think this one would be really helpful to see without the specialty filter, so you could see both of them together.
Yeah, I agree. I'll have to think about that because I linked them together. So maybe yeah, I'll have to figure out how to like manipulate the filters. But yeah, I agree.
Yeah, because I mean, just like the way that I'm trying to make my choices. Like so I opened up two tabs. So I have the dashboard open on both, and I have one with filtered for specialty yes, one filtered for specialty no. But I'm still toggling back and forth to see like, okay, the Total out-of-pocket cost for Humira is actually I can't even see it here, but it's something close to $10 million. And then I have to go over to the other tab to see that Cabometyx is somewhere over 4 million. And it's like they're not. It basically requires having multiple windows open and making these comparisons. So it's kind of hard. I'm wondering, is there any reason why we wouldn't want them together, at least on this the prioritized list visualization tab?
Well, I honestly didn't think about that because for like this list, we're just comparing them like within specialty and non-specialty.
Yeah.
But yeah, I should have thought that you would have wanted to like compare the visualizations for everybody. So yeah, I can try to add that in.
Yeah, I think, Doug, I had questioned that like maybe 6 months ago, or the meeting before that was, when we put it all together, which you to make sense with being able to see it all together. But one piece was that when we added it, all the specialty drugs were on the top, right? And we wanted to see, are there any non-specialties that worth for this board to take a look at, because it's going to affect many more people. And I think, and so the definition of the two is a little bit off as what we had discussed a little bit earlier, but yeah, that was my like I had quite like that was my question back then.
Right. And I remember that now. You're right. So it was that we were worried we were only seeing specialty.
Yeah.
But I do think that there's given what you said about like this distinction between specialty and non it's somewhat ambiguous, and so I guess it'd be helpful to see it with both. I am surprised though, like if you look at the number of users, there's only and you toggle between the specialty and non. On the non-specialty, there's only a couple drugs that have more users than the specialty ones, and that's let's see, so it's Gavalite and SPS. Otherwise, you're still looking at Enbrel and Humira as the most used.
Yeah, and the two that you mentioned are actually non-specialty drugs, truly non-specialty, that you can get it at a safe way.
Oh, so Gavalite and SPS, they're not.
Yeah. And so all the other ones are limited distribution, or it's truly specialty. And I think that's where it's crossing. Like Xtandi, I mean, it's Cabometyx is like a $20,000-$30,000 drug.
Okay. Let's see.
Per month.
And one thing I'll just kind of mention is just kind of going back to the advisory group recommendations too. I believe it was the top 4 of the ones we have on the specialty list, and then the top 3. When we're coming out with this aggregated list, the top 4 on the specialty, top 3 on the non-specialty are the ones that they had recommended. So just kind of a throwback to that is before we put everything together, those are the ones that they were actually choosing. So.
Any other comments? All right, well then I guess we move forward, Mike.
Yeah. So really, at the end of the day, we've created the dashboard. We've got a lot of good data to look at. I think there's some ways we can keep working and tweaking the dashboard. But really, we're getting down to the point where in order to kind of move on to the next steps, we need to make a decision and go forward. So I think the two things that we are needing to look at are, A, how many drugs are we wanting to try and do a review on here for this go around, and then B, which drugs do we want to shortlist? And so, my thought or vision on this was, let's create our short list of the drugs that we want to potentially review. give ourselves and the general public a couple of months to think about that, comment on it, and then we can actually vote and do the selection, and then start with the actual review process, or start the first steps rather to kick off the review process in July. So really, that's kind of where we're at, is how many do we want to do and which ones do we want to do to move forward. And as Kelly was mentioning, there's some, we have a list of where we saw the other drugs that the other states chosen. Enbrel's the only one right now that's crossing over that other states have done already. And then one other thing I want to note is for the top drugs on the list, especially for the specialty, ICER's also done some reviews on those as well. So they have data that could be useful for the board to consider. So with that, just kind of opening up here for the board to discuss and let's make a decision.
All right, guys, you have some opinions?
I can start for a little bit. I think it's obvious that if we look at this list, that like the top 5 or 6 for sure, but I think we need to consider the therapeutic class and not just pick one without looking at the competition. I'm worried about looking at one and then not the others in the same class that are people are able to switch around. Like if we choose Enbrel or Humira, I think Cimzia, Simponi, they need to be included when we review.
Can you say that again? Which ones?
So if we intend to choose Enbrel and Humira, then we need to look at others that are in the same category or therapeutic class, that like Cimzia, because looking at one and not looking at a major competitor, I think, are we limiting, or I don't know, just it feels like we need to take a look at the class, or at least the top drugs in that class.
Hung, you're kind of thinking like, they're all within the same class, all used for treating the same thing. They're all TNF alpha inhibitors. Reducing the price of one, really isn't quite equitable amongst the group. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah, and making it anti-competitive. I mean, just a whole host of issues that I can see.
Well, I guess I'm going to ask the question. The ones that Humira and Enbrel would be the more expensive. So right now, there's already, if the competition, people will be switching to the lower price if they can't afford it. So I don't really, I guess I'm questioning I understand looking at the whole class, but in a lot of ways, I don't know that it's really going to change things. I'm just pushing back a little bit.
Yeah, it's not less money. It's a lot of time is very close to each other, because that's the competitiveness of it. It's because Humira and Enbrel are much more widely known, and they've been around for a while. And so you see them go to the top of the list. There isn't a cheaper alternative when you're talking about these drugs.
Right.
Most of the time.
No, I'm familiar from the MS side. People, we ended up switching people because of cost some of the time.
Yeah.
But that's not usually the first thing that they think.
Yeah, unless there's a generic that's been out for a while,
Right.
then you see it. But for a lot of these, the only thing that we might see anything that is less is the biosimilars.
Right.
That are coming out, and there are quite a few. I mean, it's more than a handful.
Oh.
It's like 10. So
I think I agree a little bit more with Eileen here, just because if there's the reason those are at the top of the list, if it's because they have more people using them, then that means that they are more of an affordability problem in Washington. And so I think that merits, like I think Hung, what you were saying about like, oh, those are they don't really cost that much more. It's just that there's more people using them. Well, I think that matters that there's more people using them. Like that merits their affordability review, more than the ones that are less used. So I think that's just something to consider as we're making the decision.
Sure.
Anna
Yep.
Sullivan has something to say.
Yeah, I mean, specifically to Humira, there's been a flood of biosimilars come to market that are considerably cheaper than Humira. And the population is shifting to that biosimilar utilization. So I'm not sure if you review Humira, you're going to get the impact that you anticipate.
A good point. Yeah, I mean, and I think part of the review will include, what are the therapeutic alternatives? And so, yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, I was actually just looking at that yesterday, that like Humira, used to have 96% of the market share like a couple years ago, and all these biosimilars come. I mean, they still have 70%, I think, as of like January of 2025. But yeah, it's sliding, right? Where it may be, I don't know, it may be a self-resolving problem.
Yeah, it's gonna slide quick because many of the PBMs or the benefit pharmacy managers, pharmacy benefit managers are adding biosimilars to their formulary, and many as a requirement.
I think that one of the other things that we have to be thinking about here is the number of affordability reviews that are feasible by the HCA in this first year. And in the conversations that I had with Mike about this, it sounded to me like sort of like 2 was that number. And so I think that's important for us to consider as well, as like, it'd be great to do whatever, 10 of these or something. But if we only have the capacity to do 2 affordability reviews, that we have to think about that as we're making this decision. And I don't know, Mike, do you want to talk a little bit about what you actually think what you think our true capacity is?
So, having never done this before, it's hard to guesstimate. There's going to be a number of steps in terms of, and I'll kind of talk about this a little bit, but engagement with advocacy groups and patients, collecting data from industry, which we'll also be talking about, figuring out, as we go through the affordability review, exactly what do we need and how can we present that data in the most useful way for the board members to make a decision. So this first go around, it's going to be working out a lot of kinks. And then once we have our pattern, like, for example, creating the dashboard took a while, right? Because it's our first time doing it. What do we even want to see on the dashboard? The technical piece behind it of putting it together. Now that we've done it, and we've created the drug list, doing that, yes, it'll take a little bit of time, but because we know what we're doing now, next time it'll go a lot faster. So with these drug reviews, I'm anticipating a similar thing. This first time is going to be a little bit rough as we figure it out, trying to, okay, how do we collect the data? What data is useful? Oh man, we collected some of this. Maybe that wasn't worth the squeeze and the effort of getting it. And so yeah, my preference is to start on the smaller end, and if we pound through it, and it's like, Brian's like, oh my gosh, you guys did this all in 3 months, and it was a piece of cake, and everyone cooperated and gave us all the data we asked for, and then some. Then we could be like, oh, okay, sure, well, let's do a couple more reviews. But yeah, so generally speaking, I won't tell the board, exactly, but starting on the lower end and working our way up, I think is a good strategy. But of course, we can do, if we want to choose more drugs and say, okay, these are the first 2 that we're going to start with, and if we get to the other 2, great. If not, we can save them for next year. That's something else we can do as well. So.
Well,
That sounds like a good approach to me, because given that we don't know the capacity, I do think that some type of ranking or tiering of the priority. Well, yeah, we already have the priority list right in front of us. But using that prioritization to sort of fill in the capacity as much as it's available.
Yeah, and one other thing I'll mention too is, I mean, I still don't even know exactly what our budget implications are. Do we have any contracting money?
Budget was passed yesterday, signed yesterday.
So yeah, I still don't even know exactly what that means for us in terms of, capacity to do, external work and get stuff. So we're still a little bit in a gray spot.
Well, I was gonna push, because the fact that, if you're gonna have some money from the legislature, they expect some results. So I don't know that two, actually meets. I can tell you that former Senator Kaiser actually saw me and wanted to know what the hell was going on. So she's watching. And so I think that we probably need to at least come up with, I would say, 4 or 5 and then have the priority where you start on it. But want to put a little pressure on you to make sure that we're moving forward.
Well, and I do also want to say one of the things that I appreciate kind of our positioning and where we're at, because the PDABs are a new program for all the states. And so, I will say other states have tried to push too fast, and then they've had to completely stop and start over from the beginning. Whereas, I'm a slow and steady. Yeah, it takes a little longer to get going, but for me, it's proven to usually win the race. So I totally get, yeah. And the idea again is, once we have the kinks worked out, then our capacity can increase dramatically. But yeah, I think there's a balance. So
I'm just somebody that has to keep putting pressure.
No, and that's good. Someone's got to crack the whip and keep us moving.
Well, can we choose 5 and then start with 2 as initially, and then jump on to phase 2 of the first round or something, if that goes well?
Yeah.
I like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would it be okay if I share screen, just because I think I'm looking at the 2 different visualizations here, and I think it's helpful. Thank you. Okay. Is that working? There we go. Can you all see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically on the left I have specialty, and on the right I have non-specialty. So these are all the drugs that made it onto either of the 2 prioritized lists. And I think this is helpful just because it's telling us, this issue of how many users are there? We can actually see. So for Enbrel, there are 6,736. So I think, so when I look at this, specialty is actually pretty easy. So specialty on the left, Humira and Enbrel stand out so much that I think it'd be very easy to start with those 2 if we only were looking at specialty. Yeah, so that's this. Humira's all of these. Enbrel's all of these. But then it gets more complex when we bring in the non-specialty, just because Gavolite and SPS have so many users. However, their costs are really low. This is the average out-of-pocket cost. So Gavolite is the most used, by far the most used drug on either list. But the average cost per user, average out-of-pocket cost per user is $6.35. So I don't know. Anyway, I just thought that this would be helpful for us to kind of frame the discussion around the prioritization.
But Doug, this is where our kind of board point weighting system will help us, right? Because we've already, some of us, like I said, I don't care how many people are using it. If it's cheap, it's fine.
Yeah.
But we all feel differently. But we have this, so right.
I totally agree. It's just that and I hate to just take us back to this, but if we look at this list, you have to select either non-specialty or specialty. And so how do I compare Taltz? Okay, how do I compare Taltz with Xtandi?
Right. Yeah, I see what you mean.
Well, and one thing I'll say, so on that one drug that does have the really high utilization, it says for our review, it's prescription drugs chosen for affordability review. The board must determine whether the drug will lead to has led or will lead to excess costs. So, if we're seeing out-of-pocket cost is $6, does that really meet our goal of excess costs? I think we can probably put that one lower on the list, right? Whereas,
So to Greg's point, I completely like. To Greg's point, maybe it makes sense to look at the, using these two lists. It's kind of we'll put non-specialty on the left. Oops, I didn't actually. Okay, here we go. Yeah, non-specialty on the left, and then specialty on the right. If we need to choose 5, should we consider the top 5 on both of these lists to be our candidates?
that'd be 10.
I know, but maybe it's, I know, but I'm just saying maybe it's these. So like we have to choose. If we have to choose 5 right now,
Right.
I would consider the top 5 on the 2 lists to be at the 10 candidates for those 5 slots.
Right.
agree
I
with you
agree
with
with you,
that.
Doug.
Yeah.
Okay. I need 2 more tabs. I need another monitor. Okay, let's see here. So
You can also scroll to the right and see the columns. I don't know if that's, but then you can't really tell.
oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's what I was doing.
I see.
Looking at out-of-pocket costs, 4 million and change for the top there.
Because our highest weights were on total out-of-pocket cost and total paid amount.
Is that right? Oh, just pull up their weights here.
It's funny, I've got it up.
I mean, even if you look at it, just think about putting it together. The 5 on each would make sense. There would be a top 10 on a combined list.
We still have to rank though,
Yeah.
because we have to give them the prioritization. So Enbrel seems like an obvious number 1 to me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
A lot of users. It's the highest in basically every category, except for average out-of-pocket cost. These top 2 non-specialty are higher.
So, Mike, this is Ronnie Shore. We had a discussion in the core advisory group. You asked members of that group to recommend drugs. Do you have those results? Can you share that discussion?
Yes. Yeah, so basically, like I mentioned, the top 4 on the specialty were selected, and then the top 3 on the non-specialty were the ones that the advisory group recommended.
So we're on the same track.
Yeah. And
Sorry,
that was recommended before we aggregated everything as well. So, I think the advisory group was kind of reading between the lines pretty well of, what things seemed like they were going to be the most towards the top of the list.
And I agree with you, Doug, if we could see those 10 it would be easier. It's hard to go back and forth.
What if we do like the top three for non-specialty and top three specialty, and then we devise some sort of prioritization for how we go about them? I don't know. Where do we want to wait until we can like merge the data?
And we're not voting today on this.
No. So again, the idea is to create a short list here. So yeah, if we did top three, and then maybe in that time, Kelly could merge the lists. And then in July, we could just.
Well, I'd say keep the top 5 and T5, as Doug said, and to merge, right? So
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I thought we had to vote today. I was nervous.
No. No, today we're just trying to get that short list again, so that way, we can think about it, the public and, our industry partners can think about it,
Right.
send in comments.
I'm sure
And then, yeah, I know, I can see they're really excited in the back there.
I'm sure they'll have something to say.
And then, yeah, we can vote on that July and then start working on next steps basically to begin the drug reviews.
And actually, I was gonna try and review. So when are you thinking with the review you would be done with even the first one, if you're just gonna say?
So yeah, I guess that can kind of take us a little bit into our next
Steps. Okay.
next steps. And so again, this is all hasn't been done before. So data requests, depending on if industry, we send it out and they're like, oh my gosh, we can turn that around in a week, easy peasy. Then that'll obviously go faster. If it takes a little longer, that could take a little longer. So, so I'll just kind of hit that general point right now. So again, creating our short list here, voting on picking our drugs and maybe prioritizing them like 2 at a time from there. And then, so kind of the next things once we get our drugs is, surveys and forms. So, sending out data collection forms to the manufacturers, payers, PBMs, and wholesalers, creating patient advocate surveys. We already have some examples from other states that, are a starting point. And then gathering input from individuals with medical or scientific expertise. So this is some of the stuff that's, per the legislation that we need to do. Meetings also, depending on how much or we need and how much we're able to do, meetings with, patient or patient advocates, industry members, the advisory group as well. And then once we select specific drugs, we might, want to add, drug-specific people to the advisory group to help with that. And then so gathering all that information, imagine doing that from July into the fall. And then so hopefully around during our September meeting, we can have a good chunk of that information collected. And then I'm again just kind of ballparking, having then synthesizing that data into like information you can use maybe by like November, and then putting that then into an actual report probably the beginning of next year. So once we select a drug, I'm hoping 6 to 8 months for this first review to get everything put together.
The reason because it's my recollection is that the board would have to decide or recommend an upper payment level, but it can't go into effect until after the next legislative session.
2027 is for upper,
Okay.
yeah, is upper payment. So
we can't even do that until 20. Okay.
yeah, so that
takes a little of the pressure off you.
No, it's actually really nice because it gives us that time that we can create this process for the first time, come up with our first drug reviews, and then fine tune it for another round or two. And then yeah, hopefully in a year and a half from now, when we have the authority to begin looking at upper payment limits, we have a few drug reviews under our belt. And then also, again, other states like Colorado are just beginning to wade into, creating rules and stuff for their upper payment limits. So hopefully that'll give us, some good experience and best practices to share for us then to start moving into that. So that's still
I was thinking about 26, so you're off the hook.
Yeah, no, we're thinking ahead. Don't worry. So that's kind of the tentative future timeline. And then, if we can get two of those, the first two drugs on that review pounded out here in that half a year, then we can start on the next ones. And then again, once we got the process down, hopefully we can start, doing multiple more reviews at the same time, and put those together a lot faster once we've kind of got the templates to just fill in.
So then if we, let's say we come up with when we get to 4 or 5 drugs for your first list, and you get a couple done, that we will get new lists next January, right?
June.
Or June?
Yeah, it's June. It's June of that following year.
So okay. So this is from the years. I'm just trying to figure out when. The list that we have now is all the drugs through the end of 24.
Yeah, 23. I want to say the data.
23.
Yeah.
So, okay, so there's like a 2-year lag. Well, I get 1.5 years. Okay. Just trying to think it out here.
Yeah, and so that'd actually be nice because if we can get these first 2 drug reviews done, and then get the other 2 drug reviews started, at least if not done, then we'll have our new list next summer that comes out that then can create our list and say, okay, here's our next,
Right.
Because
there's we may change some of the drugs that we have this year. We may decide that we don't want to move forward on because of Huang's point of people moving off or something like that.
Yeah, well, yeah, and then there's potentially new drugs that will be on the list
That are-
because of the 7-year market
Right.
thing that we have to work with, or price changes or whatever, and so then that will sort a little bit, so we can say, okay, well, now these are going to be our new priority
I got it.
with our new list.
That's good. I just needed to get the timelines in my head again.
Yeah.
It's been a while. Did you get that straight or did I confuse you?
Reasonable. It sounds like we have a lot of time.
Okay. So do we have a consensus here that we want to have the short list of the top 5 from each group for us to look at for our next meeting?
That's what
That satisfy you guys?
Yeah, sounds good. And then we can work on getting those combined, so then we can do apples to apples comparison on a single list.
Ronnie, you have a question?
I do. Just one of the factors I think we should keep in mind is choosing drugs from different indications. Pricing of drugs is not transparent, but it's obvious that if a company is marketing a drug that's only used for 6 months for a specific cancer or infection, they're going to price it one way. If it's used for chronic use for rheumatoid arthritis, for instance, then it'll be priced a different way. So I think we should, if we're going to start with a couple of drugs, we should keep those clinical factors in mind. We don't know the pricing, and there are lots of variables in pricing, but I think that's one thing we should keep in mind as the board makes a decision about which drugs to choose.
Well, yeah, I understand what your point is, but I think that somewhat gets affected by the number of people that would be using it. Because if it's a one-time short-term use, there's not going to be as many people as, well, I guess. I never mind. After I say that, it doesn't add up.
Well, certainly some of the drugs are used for cancer, and those are not necessarily small groups. So
Right.
there are drugs near the top that fit that category. Excuse me.
But I agree with Ronnie that if we're doing an affordability review and we consider are there therapeutic alternatives
Right.
to this drug, that will matter if there's multiple indications.
And well, and of course, the real problem is off-label use too. So.
I'm gonna trust Hung to tell us the reason for it.
Yeah. Okay, well then, what's next step? No, we did next, did we finish next steps?
Yeah, so that was kind of the next steps that I was gonna run through of, you know, what our future is gonna look like here for the next 6 months to a year-ish. And again, just the things we're gonna have to put together and consider and do as we move into the actual drug review phase. So I think that kind of takes us over both of those two items of we'll create that short list of top 5 from each, combine it. We'll do a couple of drugs at a time. Once we finish those, then we'll move on to the next. We just need to prioritize them. And then that's the next stuff that we're going to be setting up here, and we'll talk a lot more about in July as we put those different pieces together. I think that kind of wraps that up. If there's any other questions on those two topics.
You guys are okay to move ahead? Yeah, looks that way. Okay, then the revisions to the affordability review data.
Yeah. So that takes us in. Basically, we're trying to plan ahead for getting all this data. We've talked about the forms before, and during our last meeting, we had a public meeting where we got some feedback from a variety of industry partners on the forms and what data they thought was feasible and versus usable or not. And so then we've been chatting with the board members one-on-one about some of the data in the forms and things that basically, what's the data that we think we really need? What's the data that could be optional or like nice to have? And then what's the other stuff that we think we don't need to include to reduce basically the amount of data processing that we need to do if it's not really relevant to determining does this cause excess costs, and also could reduce the burden on the people providing the data. So with that, Marina will kind of take this away. And again, I think the idea is board members really give us your feedback. What do you think you really need for us to collect? And what do you think we don't need is really what we're trying to hear. So that way we can make sure we're not wasting time trying to get information that really won't be helpful to you during these affordability reviews.
Marina?
All right. Yeah, thank you for the introduction, Mike. So we did 101 with each board members, and it's a bit split opinions, what you're gonna need, what you don't need. So this is just an opportunity for you to discuss among themselves and for us to hear your thoughts. I just have only like 3 slides to give you some background. And then we can go from there. So just to give you a heads up, so we did have a webinar on February 27th with stakeholders to go over the original or draft forms or information collection sheets. And then we had a commenting period, which was closed for the first round of the affordability review. So we reviewed all the comments and currently what's posted on the website is the original or the first draft, but we are now in the process of making a revision. And here the stakeholder, it means just manufacturers, payers, PBMs, and wholesalers. And each of them will have a 1-word document. It's gonna be more a descriptive information.
Sorry to interrupt.
It is.
Yes. Just where on the website is this form? I can't find it.
If you go to just the PDAB main website and click the affordability review subsections, then it should be there.
Okay.
Let me see if I can. Let me see if I can put it up here.
The manufacturer information submission form.
Yeah.
So
So this is the main website. And then if you go under affordability review here, you find the webinar recording and also all the forms for each stakeholders. Okay. And then also just to point out, so the patients and clinicians or subject matter experts, they will be surveyed separately. So it's going to be a different strategy to collect their information. So it's just the forms are intended to these four stakeholders. All right. And then, so some of the updates following or reviewing the comments, one is to be adding more clarifications. So some of the Excel templates, they have a bit confusing terminology on the column head. So more information or details were added to the data submission guide. And some of the wording change and more details on the Word document as well. So the details are added based on their the request from the stakeholder. But two other major items. One is to ease some submission burden, especially on the manufacturer form. So one, I think, kind of common theme among the stakeholders, especially from the manufacturer side, was that submission burden. And I kind of agree. We're trying to do a pretty comprehensive collection of data. So one idea was to make some sections optional, especially for information that's available from the public-facing platforms or any commercial database that we haven't access to. So like the First Data Bank or Medispan databases we can use to retrieve and interpret the data, then those sections will be optional. So that's one approach we'd like to take. We were a bit hesitant to remove the sections completely because it's kind of taking the opportunity away from the manufacturer to submit their own side of the data. Some states, they did their own data analysis, and a few complaints from the stakeholder was they kind of disagree with the data published in the Medispan FDB. They wanted to submit their own data. So I just want to keep the sections available to the stakeholder so that if they want to submit their own data, there is a section or fields for them to do it. But if they kind of agree with whatever is available to the public, and it's okay for us to retrieve those data, then they can just omit those submissions. So we're thinking making some sections optional for them. And also there are a few sections I want you to discuss today, so we'll go over that on the next slide. And just also quick comment here regarding the concerns on the confidential and proprietary information. So the stakeholders expressed their concerns on submitting their confidential and proprietary information, and I totally understand that. And the submission process will be secure. It's going to be actually a secure link that they will submit their data or information, and the link is available actually just for a really small window of the time period. So that's why the data submission guide doesn't have the whole process of how to submit yet, because the link needs to be created and it's only active for, I think, about 7 days for them to act on it and for us to retrieve the data. So again, that will be coming once the drug is selected and when we reach out to each stakeholder. And once the data is submitted, we'll apply strict data governance for the both handling and access of submitted information. So yes, we'll definitely keep all the confidential and proprietary information secure. And we'll discuss those information only in the closed session. So nobody in the public will have an access. So I just want to comment on it. And the last slide is to sort of to direct you to what to discuss today.
We're not seeing the slides.
Oh, you can't see the slide?
No, we're seeing you.
Oh, I think it's I think it's shared. Hold on, let me see. Is it coming up on your end or no?
Yes, now we have it.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry about that.
Do you want to back up just so we could see if there was
So this was just the background information.
Okay.
Yeah, pointing out, we had the webinar, the commenting period close, and here the stakeholder means just 4 entities. And then this was the general update on the forms and the process. So the data submission, the handling, access, it will be all secure. And we'll be doing minor updates on the forms where they're requested by the stakeholder. But the major discussion point today is here how to make the submission burden lighter for the manufacturers. And then, so this is the most important one. I want to think about, and I kind of give you a heads up already during our one-on-one meetings. But 4 sections we want to focus on are 1, foreign pricing, and also reviews conducted by the HTA agencies abroad, and what type of research and development costs, and also marketing, advertising, and lobbying costs. So these are the 4 sections I kind of want you to discuss among yourselves to see if you want to keep these sections or you want to delete it or simplify somehow. So these are the 4 sections. Kind of want to hear your thoughts. And it was a pretty split opinions when we did one-on-ones. So that's just a heads up.
Okay. So I guess trying to figure out do we want to do each section, the foreign pricing, go line by line on this just to have discussion?
I think that works.
Okay. So opinions. I know you guys have opinions.
I mean, I think for foreign pricing, I think I brought that up as well, and I wasn't sure kind of like how that would play into our decision if we're going to use that in some way to kind of help us decide an upper payment limit. I think if we're not including that into that formula, then it may not be as useful as what I was thinking, but love to hear whatever other people think.
I agree. I didn't see how it was relevant.
I concur. There's just a lot of noise around foreign pricing right now, and I don't think it has much to do with what we're doing here. And so I rather keep that noise away.
And it'll be interesting to see what the feds do on foreign pricing. That we'll let them have that argument.
This is a discussion that's been going on for 20 years or more. So it's
for sure. Okay, so Ronnie, did you have a comment?
Just a comment on foreign pricing. I agree that it's not an issue to discuss at this point in time. If we were to talk about foreign pricing, it would be involving policies that the industry and the government were able to develop together, which happens in most other countries. And I don't think we're even close to that. I think our role is just looking at the existing situation. So I agree. Don't
Okay.
include foreign pricing.
Review conducted by the ATA agencies abroad. Oh, this is the quality question.
Yes. So in the US, we have the NICER, that's like a third-party organization looking at the clinical effectiveness, cost effectiveness of a drug. So that will be really helpful for us to look at. But the caveat is that the ICER doesn't do the reviews on every single drugs out there. So in that case, depending on which drug you're gonna select, we may or may not have a review from the ICER. So I think that's why the other states, the PDAB, they looked at the reviews conducted by the HTA agencies abroad, and they did a whole summaries of each agency, what their conclusions were. So that's, again, we could look at ICER and look at the other agencies abroad if review from ICER is not available, or if you're not interested at all, we could delete it. I'm just wondering where you are on this aspect.
I think in the absence of an ICER review, if the ICER review does not exist, then yes, the foreign HTA would be helpful.
Okay.
I agree with that as well.
Yeah, I think any information that we can get that relieves the burden on HCA, we should use.
I was gonna say, and I think, like I mentioned, I think for the top 5 specialty drugs, just looking at my list, yeah, there's been ICER reviews done for those. And just looking at my list here. I think for the top 3, or the first and the third on the non-specialty, the first, third, and fifth.
Okay.
Do we know what agency were? Are we talking about NHS, or do we have like a set of those agencies? What it would default to?
Yeah, so let me share. So like, I think this is like a Colorado version of their review. Oh, hold on. Okay, I cannot move this somehow. Okay.
But I concur with everyone that we need to take a look at it, and I think usually, and it would be focused on pricing.
Yeah, so like for example, Colorado, I think this is a review on Enbrel. They looked at these agencies, what's available. So in addition to ICER, they try to look at the NICE from the UK, Canada, and other countries as well. So, each kind of have a review or conclusions on the cost effectiveness. I'm not really worried about clinical effectiveness. I'm more interested in this cost effectiveness part. Yeah, so these are the things that they looked at.
Okay, that was I think my point too, is that looking at the cost effectiveness and not trying to look at everything, and just focus on that piece. Okay.
Do you wanna look at the HTA agency's review from abroad, even when the review exists from the ICER, or we can say we don't need to look at it once we have a review from the ICER?
I think that's reasonable. I would certainly give more priority to the ICER review in those cases.
Okay.
Daria. Oh, Daria. Okay. You have a comment, Daria?
Hi, sorry, apologies that I was late to the meeting, balancing multiple state PDABs happening at the same time. And just wanted to first question, as an advisory board member and not a PDAB board member, want to question what role the board would like for advisory committee to play in these discussions. Do you want me to hold comments till later or jump in if there is an industry related comment as you're discussing them?
Well, since we're ahead of schedule, I think you can jump in whenever you want.
Great, thank you so much. I just want to flag in our in our letter response to this two issues about HTAs, ex-US HTAs. As you noted, we do have a lot of concerns with some countries, not all, but many of them do use qualities or or EVLIGs, which would be counter to the Washington statute. Additionally, many of the HTAs are used in other countries before a drug comes to market and are used for price setting. And since Washington is reviewing drugs that have been on the market for 7 years or more, there will be quite a bit of, substantial evidence of actual post-approval pricing and utilization from Washington and the United States across a range of clinical and other benefits. So want to make sure that the board is prioritizing in those discussions the clinical evidence available post-approval in the US or in Washington when available over pricing decisions made in other countries. Similar to your previous conversation about foreign pricing.
That's a good point, Daria. Thank you.
So, okay, so have we got conclusion then on? Is it, Marina, do you think you've got enough information from us on that?
Yes. So what I'm hearing is we can delete the foreign pricing. We kind of know we are paying high prices in the US. And then for the review conducted by the HTA agencies abroad, we'll primarily look at the review from the ICER. And if the review is not available from the ICER, then we'll look at the other agencies, but we'll focus on the ICER. So that seems to be the consensus here.
Okay. Okay, research and development costs. I would think that's, I'll just say from this one, I would think that's one that the industry would want us to have in review. But we could, I mean, if they don't want to, I guess that could be a voluntary or got it blanking out on the word. But other people's thoughts on that?
I think, I'm sorry, just the one thing to point out. So one recommendation from the portal and what other states are doing is to look at any funding coming from the federal agencies or some funding coming from the taxpayers' money during the development. That's something to be disclosed. So I think the form has the table from other states asking, did you have any funding resources from the federal agency, that kind of stuff. So again, if we're deleting the whole section, we will not have that type of information here. So just pointing out if that's something you still want to know or not. Yeah. And I think one comment from the pharma, I mean, Daria is here, but other manufacturers is that this is difficult information to submit, and I agree because they have other failures to reach one drug to the market. So it's what's to be included or not. Again, it's a bit difficult things for them to submit. And I understand that. And that's why we didn't use any Excel sheet or data submission form on this section. It's just more like a descriptive or narrative information on the Word document so that they can say, well, overall, this is the estimate, how much effort used in terms of the money, people, time, that kind of stuff. And as well as if they know or if they can identify any sources of funding coming from the taxpayers' money, then please put it in a table. So that's how the section is formatted. Again, we could edit in a way that you'd like to see. but I'm just curious, do you wanna keep it, delete it, or modify in some way?
I mean, that was largely my point, was that I don't think it's, as far as I know, I don't think it's possible to isolate the R&D costs for any single product from a manufacturer. It's a lot of fixed costs and a lot of failed products that they have to account for the costs of. And I don't know if Daria can speak to that, but it might just be impossible for them to provide that number.
Well, and even if they can, it's gonna be a wide range, right? If you're not specific, it could be $500 million to $1 billion, depending on how the company is looking at the research and development, unless we are asking for very specific information. Like what kind of support would the Orphan Drug Act helped in this? I mean, it can get pretty complicated on how it is supported by outside agencies or the federal government in the research and R&D. And so we asked for this. I think it needs to be a level playing ground where the information needs to be consistent from one to another. And so then there's gonna be some work in thinking through on what that would be.
So, Johan, you're saying that making it optional isn't fair.
I think I'm not sure. I see some use in knowing the R&D. I think just getting the data is very difficult, and then how we use the data is difficult. In the fact that one company can submit something and another can submit something, and the two are based on different criteria as what they see. I think, because there's just so many variables in it, unless then we have to be very specific in what we ask.
I guess it's just that in the legislature, all you hear about is that the reason it's high cost of drugs is research and development. So from that perspective, we could think they actually know what they spent on research and development. But what you're saying is that it would be very hard to actually quantify it.
For any one product.
Yeah, I get you.
I can see it as like, how much did it cost to raise your children, right? Like, what do you put in there?
I like that analogy.
A lot.
I also kind of see some value in offering the opportunity for manufacturers to share that information. But I think to Doug and Hung's point, like, I have no idea what we do with that at the end of the day.
Should we, I mean, if we are doing affordability review in a staggered manner, so I'm assuming you'll pick like priority 5, but we'll be reaching out gradually to them, right? So should we keep it for the first round to see what kind of information you get and whether it's gonna be helpful or not? And let's say it doesn't help at all, then we can remove it from the later affordability reviews. But for the first round, in case this gives you some additional insight, do you wanna keep this section?
I'll just
Daria?
quickly weigh in. Yeah, agree with everything. It is absolutely the cost of R&D is factored into pricing, of course, but it is also very hard to quantify for one particular drug. So agree with all the conversation here. So it is a tough job for you to find the right balance of being specific without being overly specific, and limiting that. So being broad and letting the manufacturers define that would be preferred. And also, there are wondering if you have looked at transparency reporting in states that do have transparency reporting, because there are other ways that other states are doing this. And note that Washington does have a drug price transparency program, and wonder if you have spoken to that program about how they define or how they request that information.
Do we know?
Yeah, so we do have a data submission guide for a drug price transparency program, so we could look at how that is defined. I think the challenge is that the criteria for manufacturers to report to the drug price transparency program is different than what we have for the Prescription Drug Affordability Board. And so we can't necessarily take existing data from that program for the purposes of this. I think we would have to borrow that and examine it and then see if we could leverage it for this affordability review process.
Yes, and if I understand correctly, the information or the data from the DPT program is not to this granularity. So they have, I think, just a few slots to put the R&D cost or information, but there is no narratives or no like what's included or not. We don't know what it's like the number, whatever they submit. So I think that's why as part of this affordability review, if we can get some narratives going with those numbers, it's just much more insightful rather than just here's the number and we have no idea what this number is. So I think that's why the affordability review, it's more detailed. It's gonna be helpful if you are interested in looking at how much it costs for the drug development and research.
I think Eileen is correct in that you would imagine that drug manufacturer would want to show how much R&D and that it does cost and how it's justifying the cost. I would at least say that should be an option for pharma to submit that, but perhaps we can come to an agreement on what information is submitted, how is it categorized, what would be less burdensome for pharma, what information would they have that could be used consistently across to all the companies that they can submit that. Or at least we have some consistency on how we view the data.
Well, and maybe it's a good place to start using the transparency, what's submitted for the transparency group too. But I think optional, but I also think we want to make sure that we include disclosure of grants. If they're going to give us an optional about how much they spent, we want to know how much money that was brought in. So that should be on the form too.
Okay. Sounds good.
Any other, did you guys agree, disagree with me? What do you?
My general thought is that sure, I'm intellectually curious. I'd love to see what the number is, and I really don't see how it would come into play in making a decision about a UPL or deeming a drug unaffordable. And so in that sense, like I don't know how I would ever use it. I mean, whatever. If we want to make it optional, I think it's fine. I'll be curious to see what it is. Yeah, if we get pushback and they're trying to prioritize what's feasible for them to report, I don't want them to waste their time on that when they could be providing us the other information that we really care about.
I think we
go ahead.
Ronnie, yes.
So I think that if we include that research and development costs, we should just be asking for a narrative. It's certainly not possible for a manufacturer to really define that, but it is something that we should be aware of. We should consider under at least a narrative to recognize what individual costs or what specialty issues, not specialty versus non-specialty drugs, but which specific issues a manufacturer faces in developing a drug. And so I think it's something we should consider as a background factor. Even ICER, we would use use some of the data they provide. It's not going to be the ultimate decision making. And I think one of the issues we've seen in legal cases is that we don't want to restrict people's comments or freedom of speech was actually a part of some of the lawsuits that prescription drug affordability boards have been reviewing or been faced with. I think we should include it as a background issue, not as a heavy figure in our decision. But like Eileen said, we can't ignore the knowledge, the public knowledge and approach or opinion. We can't ignore those costs. We can't ignore that some of those costs are borne by other tax-paying institutions. A simple discussion or narrative, I think, would be useful and would recognize the manufacturer and their role. I'm not a representative of the manufacturer. I'm just looking at it from a more balanced perspective. So I think it's one factor to consider as a narrative in our discussions. Thank you.
So, any other comments? So did you get an answer out of us?
So do you wanna make this section optional? But if they're submitting the narratives, give us enough details to figure out, and also any disclosure from the grants. That's what I'm hearing. Is it like a consensus here then?
Well, that's what I thought, but
Okay, sounds good.
does everybody agree with that?
I like that.
Okay.
All right. Marketing, advertising, and lobbying costs. Well, lobbying, I told you. So, I guess go. Somebody else start out on this one.
It feels like the same as how would it help us make that decision as well. So
I agree. I don't know how many use it in any of our decision making. It's actually, I think it's even less relevant than the R&D.
Yeah, I agree. I lean towards, I put it on my remove versus optional list. So
Agreed.
I mean, if you spend $1 billion on marketing, like, why does that make any difference?
Oh, I'm sorry. I just got a message from the DPT program people saying that for the DPT program, it's not a required field to submit research and development. So it's optional section, and more than half of them are not submitted. So it's empty. So I guess I can assume kind of similar thing. It's like 50-50 whether you get the information or not. So just I don't know if that changes your opinion on it or not, but it's just, yeah, I got the text saying that it's likely that information won't be available from the DPT.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So I think the general thought was marketing, advertising, lobbying don't need.
I guess that's it. I mean, the interesting thing about it is, of course, drives a lot of the price, but I guess it doesn't matter to us if that's what's driving the price. That's your guys' point, right? Yeah. Yeah. Ronnie?
So certainly we don't know what impact advertising truly has, and I don't think the manufacturer who does the advertising really can pinpoint information, but I don't think we're going to stop it. It's part of the American business system. However, I think we should recognize it and keep it as another background factor to pay attention to. In my opinion, as a pharmacist, I found it not appropriate. but at the same time, the ads are so bad that I think it has just as much negative impact on the choice of a drug as it does a positive impact. But that's what I think about Coca-Cola advertisements as well. So I don't think this is a factor that will determine how we set the prices, but I think that because of the public's perspective of that, I think we should acknowledge it more as a narrative in our discussions about a drug. I don't know if we can add some of the Ozempic songs to, is there a way to add an audio portion to our reports? I think it's something that's here for a very strong reason. It's an expense for the manufacturer. It has an impact on our healthcare costs. I think we should keep that in mind, but I don't think there's a way for Drug Affordability Board to really figure out or analyze those costs. I don't think it's transparent enough, even to the individual manufacturer. I don't think they can tell you the impact. I'm not a representative of the pharmaceutical industry. I'm repeating that again. So maybe that's something Daria should have added. But I think it's a factor we should consider as more of a narrative position, and because it is important cost. So have it there, if only to recognize that that's a part of the cost we're paying in our society.
Well, Ronnie, even though I'm probably just as curious about it as you are, I got to say that I agree that if we make it optional, nobody's going to fill it out. And I don't see making it mandatory as something that's actually going to give us anything. I mean, that we're going to use. So unfortunately, we probably just have to delete it. That's kind of where you guys were going to, I think, right? Yeah.
And it's not gonna affect like how aggressive or conservative you wanna be if you are setting up the payment limits. If it's not gonna affect your decision, then I think we can delete it. I mean, optional doesn't work for this. I don't think if it's optional, nobody's gonna submit. Yeah, like Irene said. So.
Okay,
I don't, Hong, you didn't say anything on this one, I don't think. So are you?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, I didn't think you said anything about this one.
Oh, I did. I
Oh,
said
okay.
it doesn't affect how I'm gonna view this.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
All right. Well, then I guess we're deleting that.
and I know we did have a request for a quick break. I don't know if we want to do that for 5 minutes before we're pretty close to the end, but
Yeah,
some of this.
that's fine. If you guys want to break 5 minutes? Yeah, okay. Somebody must need a phone call.
Okay.
All right, we'll be back for public comment.
Well, I think we still got a little bit,
Oh, we have
a little bit more to discuss.
Okay.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
Okay. We're coming back. We'll see. Okay. See who shows up. There we are. Okay. Okay, what do we have left, Mike? Who says?
So,
break.
No, he's there.
there we go. So yeah, Marina, do you want to just kind of finish off talking about qualities, and then I think just opening it up, if there's any other categories that the board members, as you guys were looking through the form, things that you think would be worthy of discussion that you don't need. So kind of open that up there, Marina.
Yeah, I just want to do a recap on these 4 sections as well. So the foreign pricing will delete. Reviews conducted by the HTA agencies abroad. We'll look at the ICER reviews. If not available, we'll look at them. Otherwise, it's gonna be optional. And then marketing, advertising, and lobbying costs, it's gonna be deleted. For the research and development costs, though, we'll make it optional. We ask for any like federal grants or funding sources. And then, but the section itself is optional. If they are submitting, give us the details in a narrative form. Okay, so I think that's what I heard. Yeah, and any other
I think that's what I got. Anybody, any differences?
Okay, I think I took a note of that. Okay. And then the last thing I wanna point out was the use of quality. This is a bit controversial, and the law is not super clear. It's kind of a bit gray, but the language we have in our statute is this, listed on the slide. So our interpretation was that the use of quality is not prohibited entirely, as long as we follow these rules. So some of the quality measures we can still use or look at. For example, the ICER use the equal values of life years gained. That doesn't identify the subpopulations or give any reduced value. So that was our interpretation, that we can still use quality as long as we follow these languages. But if do we have Michael, the AGA, to hear his thought, or if he can give us more insight on this, that'd be helpful.
Michael Tunick, are you on today? Let me check the guest list real quick.
Yeah, I didn't see in the
Attendee.
He's an attendee.
Yeah, but he just raised his hand, so he'll be at the top of the attendee list.
I can just one minor clarification on that. If we're using expected value of life years gained, that means that we are not using the quality. That's completely those are separate. And I think that would be a reasonable approach. And I think ICER reports usually report their results in both qualities and expected value of life years gained. So we can just if we use the expected value of life years gained, we are complying with the statute, and we should be good.
Yes, yeah, that was my interpretation as well.
Okay, I wasn't able to make him a panelist.
Actually, I was surprised. I think Daria mentioned before that we were not allowed to use expected value of life years gained, and I was confused by that because that was not the impression I was under.
Go ahead, Daria.
Thanks. I just, the language does not specifically say quali, and we do have concerns about the EVLIG. I can't speak specifically to that right now, but I'll make sure that I
It does say quali.
answer. Okay, or or severity or disability, okay, for whatever, yes. May not employ a measure or metric which assigns a reduced value to the life extension. So that's sort of a more general,
Yep.
getting at the concept of the QALY, not specifically the QALY. So, this is a very, I'll need to talk to my subject matter experts on this one, but my understanding is that we do have concerns with the EVLIG as well as the QALY.
Okay. Yeah, I'll be interested to hear what they have to say about that. But I think that the expected value of life years gained does comply with that whatever RCW 7405050 item 3. Yeah. So yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, and this is Ryan. So Doug, I believe you're right, because I believe that as this legislation was being drafted back in, I believe, 2022, that ICER did provide some language for the House and Senate for them to consider where they could use equal value life years gained. And I think this is the
That's
language.
kind of my recollection too. But in trying to remember this, I believe that is exactly what happened.
Yep. The other thing I would like to point out, so this RCW 050 is for the upper payment limit section, and we are still in the affordability review phase. So that's the 040. So just letting you know that as we are in 040 and doing the affordability review and getting the materials and things like this quality adjusted life year restriction is in the subsequent section for the methodology for upper payment limit. So when it says methodology there, no, that's not the methodology for assessing a affordability review. It's the methodology for the upper payment limit.
So we can use it quality in the.
And that's where Michael Tunick, our AAG, will provide more guidance on that. But yeah.
Yeah, and I think we got Michael moved over as a panelist. Michael, are you there?
Yes. Good morning,
There we go.
Director Mike and the board. Yeah, so I am here. I sort of start off by saying, I'm always loath to provide legal advice in the public forum just because it is not privileged or confidential then. But that being said, I've been asked to speak. Yes, this 70.405.050 does talk about the methodology to set upper payment limits. And now when talking about qualities, yes, it's a very it's a fraught term, and there is a legislative limitation on it, and it's doesn't prohibit you from using qualities, but it does say that take into account, and you see the language in blue. And I'm just trying to remember what else. I guess, were there any other questions or thoughts you wanted me to share?
Well, I think that the clarification that this is about the upper payment limits and not about that it's 7405.040, you said?
Yeah, 040 is for the affordability.
As on the affordability reviews, and that's what we're actually discussing.
Yeah, and actually, sorry, and the last thing I did want to also say is that although this is interpretation of the statute, which is squarely a legal interpretation, I want to also just say that we are talking about like health economics terms, and so even if I was interpreting this, I would also still defer to experts like Doug and some of the HCA staff who do biostatistics and health economics. So so it's not just, I guess, it's like even though statutory interpretation is a legal exercise, there is still the technical terms. You would want to refer to those experts as well.
So, Doug, do you have anything more to add?
No, I think we can. We're still going to get the ICER reports. It's just what can we do with the ICER reports, and it doesn't sound like there's any restrictions for the affordability reviews. We will have restrictions at the upper payment limit stage, but for our collection of data from the manufacturers, the ICE reports are we still want it.
Yeah, I think it's fair game to collect information, especially for the affordability review and even from review from other HTA agencies. But for setting up an upper payment limit, we just need to be careful that we follow this language. Yeah. Okay, I think that was it from my end. Unless the board members have any other things you want to discuss for revising the data collection forms or the documents.
Okay, guys, anything else you want to discuss or any concerns you have? Hearing, going once. Okay, well, then we move on to public comment.
Okay, great. So we did receive, just want to note, did receive a number of written comments. I forwarded those to the staff and the board as well. And so I guess opening up the floor to anyone else who wants to do public comment. I think just remembering keeping to our rule of 3 minutes and yeah. So if you have anything, please raise your hand. And
Daria?
Thank you. For the record, Daria McGrew on behalf of Pharma, really appreciate the lengthy and thoughtful conversation in all of this. Appreciate, Marina, the affirmation about secure submission of data. That is very, very important to manufacturers. So that is appreciated. I should have jumped in. I didn't think to jump in exactly when you said it, but it took me a little bit to process. I believe that you said that there would be a pretty limited time frame to submit the information through the secure portal, and that might be problematic. It depends on how long a lead up time there is for manufacturers to gather the information. Even in a more limited form, it still is a lot of information to be gathered. And so just want to make sure that please you provide enough information for manufacturers to gather the information, even if the actual submission date maybe is limited, but it does take quite a while for them to get some of this information together. Two concerns I just want to highlight with the meeting materials in general, and I apologize if you talked about this before I was on the meeting. There is an inclusion of a comparison of other states. The other states are highly variable, as you noted, in what factors go into their eligibility. There are also errors. I'm not an expert in Maryland or Colorado, but I have been involved in with Oregon's PDAB since the beginning. The list that is in your meeting materials, and I know it's just sort of listed as an interesting comparator, but I just want to highlight that list was later determined to be quite a few errors. Several of those drugs were later determined not to be eligible and should not have been on the list. And then last year, Oregon just decided because of errors and problems in their process that they just stopped affordability reviews in the middle of the year and decided to restart in 2025. So, just issues with comparing between states. And then our letter highlights a concern with rolling up drugs based on active ingredient. We do have said before, and we do believe that rolling up by NDA and BLA is more appropriate. You can have drugs that have significant developments in delivery or technology or patient ease of experience, and they will have the same active ingredient but different costs or different conditions that they treat even. So that could complicate affordability review if you're comparing things that would be better compared to separate. You're rolling up drugs that should be considered separate drugs. Thank you.
Okay, is there anybody else?
Double check the question real quick. I don't think there is anyone else with comments. Okay.
Boy, quick meeting today. All right, well, Anything with good of the order from the other board members? Well, then I guess we'll get an hour back of your time. Thanks. And when's the next meeting? Is July?
Yes, July 15th. Yeah, that
Okay.
sounds about right.
Okay. All right, July 15th, guys.
Okay. See you then.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Great.